we make such a mistake in the energy it takes to not acknowledge, to try to hide those scars, to try to hide those failures in systems, in processes, and things that happen in our business, that you may be losing the very information you need for that solution that's not only going to revolutionize your business, but your industry, especially in a time of high change.
Hello and welcome to the Best You interview series. It's Gary here. Again, thank you very much for taking the time to join me. And today I am joined by leadership strategist and founder of Heartnomics, Hanna Bauer, who is here to discuss how leaders can move beyond routine habits and inspire real change by connecting heart and excellence. Hannah's approach to leadership is deeply personal and profoundly unique. As a child, she battled what at the time was determined to be a terminal heart condition and underwent an innovative heart surgery that actually revolutionized heart surgery from that point forward. And that experience didn't just save Hannah's life, it gave her a framework for understanding how organizations can also suffer from their own forms of disease. She began to see how unmanaged leadership creates the same kind of difficulties that she experienced, and how organizations develop their own debilitating symptoms, and how simply coping isn't enough to survive, let alone thrive. As a Maxwell Leadership faculty member, Hanna has trained executive teams worldwide and guides organizations across industries to address their failure points and innovate through what she calls transformation through love and excellence. Who doesn't need more love in their life? I'm a massive Beatles fan, so it's all about love for me. Hanna, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Gary. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Absolutely thrilled to have you. And it's such a unique story that you have. And I'd love for you to elaborate on that, because taking, such a profound experience as a kid, going through it, contributing to essentially to science at the same time, and then as an adult, looking at that and saying, wait a second, there are similarities here in terms of my own personal experience and what I'm seeing demonstrated. Not everyone would do that, Hanna. People would take the experience, they would be grateful, they would go on living with their life, and you chose to actually take it, embrace it, and use it for the betterment of organizations. So tell me a bit about your journey and give us a wee bit of an overview of the things that I left out.
Yeah, no, actually, I took that first choice that you talked about, where like people are like, oh, I'm grateful, move on. I actually did that.
Yeah.
Like, even tried to put it like under, like, oh, no, that really didn't happen. Has anybody ever gone through some hardship? No, not me. I did. I actually took that route out. And I would say, in all fairness, it wasn't until like really 20 years later where it hit me like in the face. And it was really a call from the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta when, they wanted to do a news and a documentary. Like, oh my gosh, suddenly, I mean, I had talked about it here and there, but I had not really like exposed everything. And especially, of course, how can I say no? I mean, this was the hospital that changed my life, and they wanted to do a documentary. They wanted to celebrate what it meant. And that's when I found out, like you mentioned, 3,000 other children had been saved by the surgery. And it was at that point like, oh,
Wow.
I got it. And again, it was by reviewing the experience. Well, what happened during that time? So I went back and realized that I hadn't left it behind. I mean, I was trying to hide it, but I was still operating in it. That's where I realized that so many of the things that really, at that point now, I was an entrepreneur. I had gone through many leadership positions. I had had the absolute privilege to serve at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. So I was working, I was achieving great things with teams, and I had learned a lot. And then that's when it all kind of came back, like, okay, what's really going on, and understanding that a lot of the way that I survived really in those very painful moments and going through heart disease were the same principles I was applying for teams. They were the same also. And the reason why I was able to apply those to teams is because the symptoms felt very similar. The exhaustion, the inability to, like, the anxiety that would come in, the inability to really even like take a breath, the consistent loss of, just the fogginess all of these things were things that I actually experienced that even hurt my leaders experience in the times of uncertainty, the times of disruption, the times of stress, the burnout, really, where I had, even people that don't go, are not able to go, or they had to leave early, take a personal day because it's too much. It's overwhelming. That feeling of overwhelm. You don't even know quite what's going on, but it just felt like that. And I remember being on one day, just feeling that. And it's like, oh my gosh, this felt exactly like my heart disease, except I didn't have it. I didn't have heart disease, but I was going through what a lot of the leadership, when you take on the leadership, the weight, and don't do it with heart and try to put all these other things in place. And I realized at that moment that I had left my first love, which was the people, because I was choosing something that did help us, processes and systems alone, but not understanding really that that in itself was not going to give me sustainability. It was going to be my human system that was going to be sustainable, that was going to give me a sustainability so that the processes and systems could then work for the humans that were there, which is the same thing that happened with my heart. My heart, it had a malfunction in the sense of not being able to drive clarity to the energy to the places to where it makes the heart beat. So it would make my heart go super fast, and it would make my heart go abnormal. Tachycardia when it goes fast, abnormal when it's arrhythmia. Same thing I saw in the organizations when everything was an emergency, everything was urgent. You go into the office, everything's a fire. And it's like this constant state of responding, of constant state of tachycardia, and not having that state. And I was seeing that in my business, I was seeing that in my days. But then I also saw the other part, the arrhythmia, the abnormal parts where it was one here, one there, different rhythms, buying for the stuff. And that, what did that look like in the business? Conflicting priorities. It looked like silos. It looked like miscommunication. That's how it would express itself. So I, as an entrepreneur, I started applying these principles that I knew worked for my body, understanding that the internal alignment really gave that external execution, the ability to have performance. And yes, we met KPIs. Yes, that meant having a standard. But yes, that also meant giving the rise to innovation, which essentially is what happened with me. I had a innovative surgery that at the time had not been tested, had not been really, they didn't know what it was going to do, but there was the potential of not only revolutionizing my life, but the way that treatment happens. So it's been an interesting ride. It was incredible listening from my doctors, even understanding what happened during that time. And it's really what I do with businesses today. I help them create pathways the same way that it was done for me with lean, taking away all the things that we don't need. Burning, essentially, that's what happened with my ablation. They burned away the stuff so there can be clarity. And that's why I lead leaders. What do we need to take away that can provide that clarity?
Yeah, the clarity and the focus really, really resonated with me there in terms of, if you have some life changing news,
Mm,
the amount of times that I've been at a funeral in life and everyone's there and you're kind of like, oh, you never know the minute. You really should live for the day.
mm,
And then you go away and you get back into your routine and you get back into daily life and doing what you were doing. That's neither good nor bad. It's just what happens. And then you
yeah,
get together again and you're kind of like, whoa, you never know the day. But then when you have that life altering information, where life is going to be different from that particular point forward.
yeah,
It provides that level of focus, that level of clarity, that level of opportunity to stop and say, what am I doing? Why am I
yeah,
doing that? Is that helping? Is it serving me? Is it actually congruent with who I am as a person of value and a person of impact? And it's a gift through potentially devastating circumstances, but it does
mm.
provide that level of clarity. How do you get organizations to motivate themselves to get to that point where you're maybe not seeing things as clearly right now as you could and should be?
Oh my goodness. Well, you brought up a couple of ways, right? Sometimes it's because you just get ill or you learned the bad way. Like maybe life force you to like stop.
Uh,
So sometimes the same thing happens in organizations. Change from the outside takes like what we say, it takes the floor away from you or it makes you stop. So what does that look like for organizations? Sometimes we are forced to look into those things because we had to have maybe massive layoffs because we couldn't have the cash flow coming in, or their compliance things. Suddenly standards changed, and now our product no longer meets spec, or the big clients, the ones that were basically supporting 80% of our funding, are now gone, or you didn't get the grant again. So sometimes it's those like, whoa, it forces us, right? The other way is to do also what you said, is stop and say, oh, hey, what happened? So there's a beauty also in purposely stopping so that you can see, hey, let me take a look at what's going around, so that I'm not in the reactive sense, but I'm in the, just let me take it in, what's here, what's really important, and be able to respond to the current situation. So there's both. Now the stopping requires discipline. I mean, that's what it does, is it's really taking that leader, knowing that, hey, I need not only awareness, but I need also the perspective, so that when I am aware, how do I integrate solutions? And that is, you can't integrate a solution if you don't even know what's going on. Again, you can't change what you don't know. And even if you, as you introduce change, you know that change is going to create more change, and a solution may actually create a problem. So it does take time to step away, look at things systematically, look at things in processes, and just look at, like I always bring up to the car, like, think about race cars. They're amazing, amazing motors, and the way that they're built, even the whole structure, and they can go and go and go and go. But one of the things immediately in the race, what do you see? You see them always pulling away too in the middle of the race, because they have to align. And it's not a bad thing. It's not because they were defective. It's not because they're not the best. It's not because, hey, they didn't know what they were doing to begin with. It's just part of what happens when they're used, especially a car that's being used at its maximum potential. Same thing happens in organizations. A leader being aware, and a self-aware leader understanding that even in our going fast, when we're performing, we need to have those times to pull away so we can align. Because we see it just like in the car, when you're not aligned quickly, it can be a not only chaos, but it can harm people. It's actually a safety thing. So being understanding that me pausing, us staying to take that break, is not a judgment like, hey, we're doing something bad. On the contrary, it can be because we're doing amazing things. So we're going again, we want to seek this opportunity, but so that we can go and be able to seize opportunity, we do need to take a moment so we can align, so we can go full speed ahead again.
Such a great analogy there of the, the car, the machine, going full bore and,
Mhm.
to its maximum potential, and then the requirements of being able to give it a break to ensure it's consistently fed and maintained and looked after, so that it can do that again in the next race and the next race and the next race, and during
Right.
practice. I guess, one of the interesting things that you said there, Hannah, was what I've seen in many organizations is leadership having the opportunity, or leadership creating the opportunity to say, we can't continue at this speed, or we
Mm,
can't continue with this volume of work, or we can't, insert whatever challenge is happening there. But what I don't see a lot of is, and here is exactly what I'm going to do about this. And
mm,
some of it, there could be, it's just more of a reflective moment that gets externalized, just to
mhm,
to acknowledge the situation, to say, we know and understand that this is a very difficult situation. This is a finite period of time through this growth opportunity that we have, or through some other challenge that has been presented. The conversation doesn't then expand to say, bear with it for now, if you can. If you can't, please let us know. And when we get to the end, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to learn the lessons. We're going to get better. We're going to give ourselves an opportunity to pause, to reflect, to recuperate, and
mhm,
there's that opportunity to seize those opportunities, like you mentioned
mhm.
earlier. Do you see that in organizations when
Yeah.
you're working with them, Hannah, where there's the acknowledgement, but not so much the action planning to say, this is what's coming next?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, you talked about two things. You talk about finite, that means things that have an end, and what organic things, yeah, they have a finite, there's a finite stages, right? And you also talked about growth, which is what happens with organic. Again, organisms, healthy organisms, they grow. Well, how do they grow. I mean, well, let's just take a lesson from the seasons. Places, for those of you who have seen four seasons, right? You have your winter, your spring, your summer, your fall. Well, what happens in the winter? They're resting. There's still growth, but you may not see it in that part. I mean, you see that there's parts where it's completely bloom, like, it's not like spring, we're super active, with all kinds of allergies that we all get to enjoy, and all of this bloom and things, and so this movement in spring, right, versus winter. And then, how you have your summer where you're just like, hey, we're experiencing this together, and then your fall, again, the harvest season. So understanding that there are seasons to the business, and I see the mistake in that is a lot of time the leader, we're always at growth. Well, you can't always be at this growth. And even if you're at growth, you have to understand, even in growth, you acknowledging the humanity aspects. How do we grow? I mean, like, I have kids, I have 5 kids. I can't tell you, like, this just a one time, like, okay, this is your time to grow. This is what we're going to do. No, it happens growth. And what happens even with a child is, for growth and development, is they have to sleep. If they don't sleep, they're not going to grow. You can have great diet, you can have a great family life, you can have a nurturing environment, you can have all these things, access to all this stuff, but you don't let the child have the rest that they need, especially when they're learning so much, right? I mean, because they're sponges, literally. I mean, think about the rest. Think about even how our brains reset. The brain, the healing moment that happens, especially like you at 2, 3 a.m. when your circadian rhythm. Naturally, there is a rhythm to us as humans on the rest, on the recalibration that we need. So there's like both a cleanup of the things that weren't used in your brain, but also the creation of the new neurons that we need so that we can go and do it again and do even better tomorrow, so we can learn. So you have to understand that to everything, there's a rhythm. Companies, organizations, they seem to ignore the rhythm. And this is where we get into trouble. And I completely agree with you. There is a rhythm. There is a season. There's seasonalities to the work. There's seasonalities even. A business that is 5 years old is going to be operating and going to learn different than a business that's 10 years old, that is 20 years old. It's not judging. It's not judgmental. Like, hey, you're wrong. Why are you not acting like a 20-year-old? Why you're not doing the finances, or even the 20-year-old business? Hey, have you looked at the 5-year-old business? Again, yes, there's a completely, and I will say that the myth that comes in a lot of times with this technology tools is that we can grow faster, we can scale faster, we can do everything faster. But again, you cannot defeat nature. We still have humans, and humans have that cycle of growth. There's always a cycle of growth to everything, even to the technology parts. That's why it's called developers. They're developing. That means that when they started, when they were in the beta, what do they have? They have a period of testing before they release it to the other people, right? Same thing. Organizations, this is where we have to own it. This is where the system owners do it. This is where leaders have to own it. And be not only aware, but be courageous. Because it does take courage to have these conversations, to where you acknowledge, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go, and this is what it's going to take. And it may take that we're not performing at this level that we know we can right now, because we need to recalibrate, adjust with, again, the result, the hope, the performance that we're going to be able to operate at this level. But you can't consistently be putting the pedal to the metal and expect everything to go well and get upset when we're not keeping the same speed.
Definitely. Absolutely, definitely. And I'm sure everyone who's listening or watching would absolutely resonate with that if they have lived through a type and style of environment like that, where you've got that situation where you're essentially thinking, is there an end to this? Is this likely to come to an end? And I think that's what I didn't do a great job of explaining earlier, is that I think people can, a mantra that I live my life to is, people can put up with anything as long as they know. As long as they know what's happening, as long as they can reconcile that with where they're at in their life and their journey and such, and when they see a light at the end of the tunnel. So the acknowledgement part of, we appreciate, know, and understand this is very difficult. This is a unique situation for us based on the factors or parameters that are in place right now. It's that it's that next step. Here's what you can expect to happen
Yeah.
next. And I don't see that performed consistently in organizations, to be able to provide themselves the clarity so that they can then share said clarity with the team members to say, you might like this, you might not. And either one of them is okay, but I'm going to tell you what it is. And I'm going to tell you why it's important, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do about it. Hopefully you're on board. If you're not, we can have a conversation about that. How do you support leaders to take that step from acknowledgement to action so that there is that clarity that can be cascaded?
Well, so there's a couple of things, right? I mean, to have these conversations, first of all, I don't know if, anytime you want to do something, you don't want to take the courage to measure it unless you're doing something about it. So, a lot of people, like, for example, you might start on a weight loss journey. You may not actually weight yourself. People may wait to weight themselves until they're ready to start. In the
Yeah.
meantime, I'm not going to measure anything because I'm even afraid to know what's going on. And I think that's what happens in organizations too. They don't take the time to measure the things that need to be measured because, like, I'll get to it when I get to it, so I'm not keeping a pulse on the different areas. So when it comes time to, like, oh, we're getting ready to do something, or this may get out of is getting out of hand, I may not have the data necessary to be able to respond because I never kept it, or maybe now the data is overwhelming
Mm.
because I did it. I wasn't looking at my numbers. So one of the things I would say for leaders is you got to know your numbers. I mean, that's what we do in health. I mean, that's when we're looking at, hey, my, especially in times of growth, times of development, my child, as a baby, had to go to the doctors a lot more times than, once they hit a certain age, at 6 years old, and once they hit the teenage years, and same thing as adults, we're happy when we get in there, right? So,
Yeah.
but you have to think about it that, especially at a time of growth, you really have to have a pulse on what the organization is going through. Because the reason why we're not having these conversations is because we don't have a validation, or we don't have a common ground to have these conversations, where a leader may say, great job, everyone, and great to everyone did not mean great, because that great did not acknowledge maybe the fact that somebody had to work 18 hours versus somebody working 2 hours and they still get paid for the same. Maybe that acknowledgement didn't take into account the massive amount of extra expense that we had to get to for extra contractors and extra people because we didn't do what we needed to do in time. So now a project is over 20-30% above budget. So there's great understanding what are things that make us great. Having those measurements in place help us to have in those courageous conversations, because that's why we don't. I mean, we have a feeling. I know that things are not well. I know they can be better, but I really don't have a common ground to communicate this with the people that actually are the decision makers, that maybe that I need, to get the funding, to get the resources, to get the yay for extra labor, to get the yay for this additional software, or whatever it is. I don't have the perhaps the necessary context in which to bring it up. And also that goes back to the psychological safety, because that's the other part, is having the relationship with the people that would be your sponsors for projects, that would be the ones that are impacted and who are the stakeholders in that decision. So I would say two things: know your numbers. What are the numbers that matter to you for impact in the area that you're responsible over? And then who are the stakeholders in your organization who also shares their responsibility, or has, basically skin in the game for these numbers to be well? And that's the way we start going through those conversations.
Yeah, I love the reference to the courageous conversations, and the fact that I haven't heard that term before, and it really, really resonates because there is an absolute degree of courageousness that's attached to having conversations that some people might find difficult. And I've always, not always actually, recently, in the last 10 years or so, I've started to think about difficult conversations, and then
Mhm.
what makes them difficult? Well, it's the subject matter, or it's the actual person involved, or the sensitivity that might be attached to this, or the potential negative consequences that might come from this. And those are certainly outputs, or possibly inputs, or parameters that are going to impact and factor the conversation, Hannah. But one of the key things from my perspective was, what happens if we don't have the conversation? What if we just say, you know what? I could probably get away with not having it, or it might be an email, or it might be a voicemail, or it might be some other type of media that you use to try and circumnavigate the situation. But when you start to think, right, okay, if I don't have this conversation, if I genuinely just avoid it in some way or dilute it to a point where it becomes ineffective, how much am I helping as a
Mhm.
leader? What is my role as a leader? Is it to help and develop and nurture, the team and give them the best opportunity to succeed? Or is it to protect my own feelings and comfort? And then trying to figure that out there. How do you see that manifesting itself in organizations that you work with?
Well, we do both. I mean, we're wired for survival. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a
Oh,
bad thing. Like, maybe it's, not my business. So I'm either going to avoid, I'm going to hide, I'm going to run away from it. You know what? I'm going to start looking at somewhere else right now because I know which way this is going. So,
yeah.
I mean, there's just ways that we cope with it, right? I mean, there's ways that we manage it in our own personal lives. And again, that's why I do 100% believe as a leader, you cannot give what you don't have. That means you have to have that internal alignment. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. If you personally run away from problems, if you personally don't confront conflict in your everyday, you just, I mean, I can tell you, having 5 kids, there's been many times where conflict just over chores. But I
Yeah.
mean, I can either choose to shut the door and y'all deal with it, or I can go in there and be the mom that I'm called to be and like, hey, what's up? So understanding that very much how you deal with your things personally are going to impact the way you deal things in the workplace. So that is one thing. That's why, again, I 100% believe in leadership development because it starts with yourself. And there is a leadership lid. I mean, it's not like, oh, I'm in the workplace and I'm going to do it. For some things, definitely, even like if you go to places, the culture of a place, if you have a culture in the organization that very much welcomes, hey, we really do want your perspective, we really do want you to bring these ideas in, and they actually do something with it, you're probably going to be a lot more inclined to be able to do that. You actually feel that you're making a difference, and you feel like, I'm actually going to have not only influence but an impact in the workplace. And that also may transfer into home, because like, oh, you're empowered in a business. Guess what? At home, I'm also going to bring the same thing. Like, hey, I see how we deal with it, like in a good way. So it's not only just like one thing, like, oh, everything that you bring up from home, you're going to bring over there, but it's also vice versa. I saw collaboration in my workplace today. I saw negotiation in my workplace. I saw social impact in my workplace. How can, as a family, how can we do volunteer together? How can we collaborate in these chores? How can we negotiate on the chores? So there's also good things. So understanding that there is this back and forth. So I would say there's a couple of things, right, that you have to understand. You have to understand the culture of the organization, and the organization has to understand the culture, because you can say, "Hey, our culture is our values that are on the wall. It's our mission and our vision statement, and that's what, as far as they stay. It's on your website. It looks all cute. It looks all this stuff, but nobody knows how to use it. And if your
Yeah.
leadership doesn't know the mission and the values, and they're not using that to make decisions daily, that's not the culture. That is a mask. What's the real culture? So you have to understand what is the culture that's there, because the culture is going to either open up opportunities to be able to do exactly that. It's going to help with courageousness. It's going to help with empowerment. It's going to help to be able to really come up with solutions, or it's going to shut that down. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, if I'm the one who brings it up, hey, has anybody thought of this? Then suddenly it's put on me. And that's why people are afraid of data. I mean, having done project improvement as a black belt consistently, as soon as I start asking questions, I get this. People start getting afraid. People are like, what? And suddenly think their job is on the line. What are they doing that's wrong? All of these things. It's like this immediate thing, like, oh my gosh, they're going to know even what I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. There's immense resistance to data, because consistently in a business, the way you use data, if you use it for punitive purposes, is going to be received punitive, even if your real motive is like, I really want to help my people. I really want to be able to be there and give them the support that they need. I went through that. I mean, I wanted to actually make sure everybody got paid. I want to make sure that they could feed their kids. I want to make sure I wasn't going to jail as the entrepreneur. So I needed data. They didn't see it that way. They did not see it that way. They saw it as a fault finding move from management. And that was because I didn't have the report. They didn't really know the culture. I was walking into a place where I thought things were one way because of what we said, but I was not listening to really know what was happening in the floor, what was really happening in the offices. So even the motives, even if you say, hey, my door, I have an open door policy. Anybody who wants to can walk into my office place for questions. Really? When's the last time somebody did that? Because if you have an open door policy and people ain't walking through the door, why? Because you can't just hide behind like, hey, I have an open door policy. My people know if they have any questions at any time, they can just walk right on in. When's the last time somebody did that? When's the last time somebody wrote you that email, that sent an email, those, what's really happening? So you have to see, the way that we even voice something, what is the response? What is the action? And that's gonna be very much in line with the ideas that I brought to the table, the perspective, even in things that may be going adverse, the perspective in things that are going good. Even there's some things that are really going good that there's such adversity, people won't talk about it. I've been there. I've been in those places. Well, why didn't you say that's really good? Well, I didn't know. And that's a problem when people don't know when something's good and when something's not good because we don't know what well is. Many times we just don't know what well is. There's no clarity in what is the behavior we want because there's no clarity in the culture.
Yeah, and it's so then it manifests itself into learned behavior.
Yeah.
Because if no one's speaking up, then that's the norm. That's, you do your job, and if you'll find out about it, if something is going catastrophically wrong, but no news is good news, and then just carry on. And there's so much rich data there. I'm so glad
Yes.
that you're latching, you're not latching onto the data, that you're emphasizing the importance of the data.
Yes.
That you would never want to, as a small business owner or an entrepreneur, you don't want to leave the scene of a learning without actually getting the learning and then doing something with the learning to say that worked really well, or this was not as successful as I thought it was going to be for these reasons, and I'm going to course correct and tweak it a wee bit, and then next time I'm going to make sure that people know and understand in advance, or that
Mhm.
they receive the information in this way, or that this is communicated through a medium that's going to be consumable in that particular moment, and things like that. And it's those, I have this vision in my head of leaders, even leaders who are very, very very, very dedicated to leadership development, like you mentioned earlier, Hannah. I still have this kind of vision in my head where they're walking along the hallways of the workplace, and there's all these learnings and great ideas just bouncing off of them because
Mhm.
because they're so focused on the next thing. They're focused
Yeah.
on making sure they can get to that meeting on time, making sure that they know and understand what the agenda is, and the potential for observation and the potential for absorption of
Yeah.
what they're observing, to be able to say, why do these folks seem to be so down on what they're doing? Why do these folks seem to be in such a joyous mood? Why do these folks seem to always be sitting around?
Mhm.
And just using that to be able to just ask some questions.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I'm just noticing this in a, not, as you mentioned earlier, not in a punitive way. I'm very curious. I would love to know what I'm seeing, and then to be able to actually take action on what that information would present to you.
Yeah. No, and it takes energy because I mean, a lot of times it's like, hey, because I want to stay focused, it takes energy. I mean,
Yeah,
it's there's good focus, obviously, but you can't be so focused that that you really lose focus of the important thing, right? Because we can think that the important thing is really not. We can mistake fires and urgency over what's important, and
yeah,
then those important things become then urgent, become those fires. It is. It is a point of awareness. It is a definitely a relationship that we have to get well on our own personal lives as leaders with failure.
yeah,
That is the bottom line. Kind of comes to that, like, hey, no, I don't want to fail. Like, yeah, we're all gonna fail together. Well, let me explain that to my board of directors and CEO. Like, hey, guess what, you guys, we failed 5 times this week. No, we don't talk about that. We
yeah,
like to talk about the better things, but it's in that failure that we really do understand and those greatest lessons. I mean, I can tell you in my part. Now, one of the things, for example, with me, I talked to you about the innovative surgery, which is awesome. But before that, there were 2 other surgeries. Before that, there was 5 years of a lot of failed interventions, of a lot of failed drugs, of a lot of failed basically everything.
yeah,
And one of the things that failed, which was huge in my life, especially when I was 12, was an open heart surgery. Now, this open heart surgery, for anyone who's ever heard it or about it, I mean, literally, like, you're cut in half with a, just with a blade. I mean, like everything that happens afterwards. Again, I'm a 12-year-old, going into my preteen years. Now I'm gonna be permanently scarred, but hey, it was gonna give me life. It doesn't matter that I'm not cut up if I'm dead, right?
Yeah.
So for them to test it and immediately, not even 24 hours out of the operating room, discovering that it didn't work, it was traumatic for me. I mean, I'm still like in the pain. Now I'm going through the same disease, I'm going through the same pain. And now I'm also healing from major disruption in my entire skeletal system, body, muscles, everything that will never be the same. And I'm no better. And I didn't realize how much that scar, in the lengths I went later on in my life to hide that scar. Because so many people didn't understand that scar. They like, okay, what happened? That's gross. I mean, I have people, kids too. Like that just looks disgusting. I mean, just it happens, right? Other people, other fellow girls or people just, what's that? So I went through amazing amount of lengths many times to hide that scar. And I didn't even realize how much energy was taken from me to do so. Um, but of course, when it's time for the surgery and the innovative surgery, hey, the one that worked, that's the one we talk about. We talk about that one. We talk about, hey, this one's great. And it wasn't even after past the 20 years that when I got a perspective change, and actually came from my now husband, is that he thought that that scar was beautiful. And when I had that perspective of beautiful, I also like, well, why would he think it's beautiful? Because it definitely did not bring good feelings for me. And usually beautiful things bring good feelings. And then I realized that had it not been for that scar, there would have not been the learning necessary for having the surgery, the innovative surgery that eventually changed my life. The scars and the failures, as massive and traumatic as they can be, give us the very lessons we need to have life, and not just to have that life for our own organizations and our people. In my case, again, that surgery at like 10 years ago, I mean, maybe more now, had already saved 3,000 other kids.
Yeah.
But the failure, so we make such a mistake in the energy it takes to not acknowledge, to try to hide those scars, to try to hide those failures in systems, in processes, and things that happen in our business, that you may be losing the very information you need for that solution that's not only going to revolutionize your business, but your industry, especially in a time of high change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Again, such rich data. And if everyone is, I don't know if it's ignoring it, but kind of pretending it's not there, or it's kind of probably not my job to really raise that, or maybe we should think about another way. The incentive structure, I guess, within an organization would come to the fore there. And again, it's that richness, that volume of data that you've already lived it. You've earned it. Yeah, and you've
You can't take the scar away.
exactly 100%. So you can either just pretend that if someone says what's that, and you say what's what, I don't know what you're talking about, and folks are like, but I can see that, and you're like, nothing to see here. Okay, that's a way, to yeah, and I could see organizations doing that rather than, as you say, are inferred, Hannah, embracing it and saying, if we're not failing, we're not trying. If we're not failing, we're not growing. It's what we do with the failures, with the data, with the attitude, with the focus, with the energy, to be able to say, we're going to fail again, but we're not going to fail that way. We're going to incrementally get better as we go forward. So tell me about Heartnomics.
Yeah.
The purpose and I have a rough idea of the inspiration behind Heartnomics, of course. How did that all come around for you based on your experiences to that point?
Yeah, well, here's the deal, right? I mean, like, I'm glad my doctors took a closer look at that failure. I'm glad that they didn't just let it go, but they didn't just take a closer look, but they also got more help, because at the end of the day, my surgery was done not just by them, it was done in combination of 3 hospitals. It required collaboration. So I'm glad they took a look at the consistent failure and come up with a solution, which is the same thing that even with the way that I looked at my scar. I'm glad that I had a different perspective because once I had that change of perspective, instead of trying to hide my scar, I embraced my scar for what it was. And that's what Heartnomics does. I mean, you have to do the same thing. Sometimes we just need perspective. We need to look at things in a different way, because when you look at things in a different way, it gives rise to innovation. What does that take to have the perspective? Well, you need the data, you need the culture, you need to know the operating systems, you need to know the human systems. And that's what I work with, transformation through love and excellence. So, love being the people, love being really, again, we are humans serving other humans by humans, right? So we have an internal and external customer that we're constantly providing a lifeline to, and that is love. But then we have the economy, right? That's where the Heartnomics comes in, the nomics side, which is the processes, which is the systems. Understanding that, for example, with me, I had a problem with my heart, but that meant I couldn't breathe. I didn't have a lung problem, I had a heart problem, but it was being expressed in my lungs. It was being expressed in me not being able to breathe. And the same way in the economy of your heart, in the economy of the business, is that there are systems that may be malfunctioning, impacting other systems. So we help with giving that systematic functional view to leaders so they can provide the right, I say in a sense, triage, the right focus to the areas that are currently maybe stuck, systems that are stuck, systems that are being overproducing, systems that are experiencing perhaps a lot of waste, but yet causing strain in other systems. So I do that through consulting. I do that through diagnostics. I do that through workshops, training. You'll see me speaking also in conferences and stages. So that's how I help. And of course, executive coaching with not only the leaders, but also their core teams.
Yeah. Where do you see you getting the most value? Is it that compounding reality of that there are a number of different factors here that we need to consider before we get to the
Yeah.
root cause, not just the symptom? Or is there one particular part, like in terms of your process? Is it
Mhm.
I start with the leaders, for example, or I start with the people on the floor? How does that work, or does it depend?
Well, usually the ones that feel the pain a lot of times are the leaders, right? With the communication. It usually shows up in communication. We have miscommunication, and suddenly what we thought was going to be a budget of 10,000 ended up being a budget of 30,000, or we couldn't could meet the consumer specs. So that's a lot of times that what happens. Now the employee may not consistently understand because they were just doing what they were told to do, and now they're being held accountable for something they don't get. Well, what happened? But the one who's might be in the hot seat may be the one who's the project leader and suddenly like, hey, there's all these other things. So that's usually I when I'm called in, is I'm called in communication parts, and so getting into that common language. But then into what I move into the diagnostic, because it's like a doctor, like an X-ray. Like you don't know, I don't know what to say. Well, I remember doing a project where they thought it was a shipping and delivery problem, and actually the problem ended up being in the administrative side because they had the wrong software. So understanding that, so I will do a diagnostic with my people. Now we'll take care of whatever the fire is right now. If it's communication, let's do a communication workshop, let's do a communication assessment, let's do it with the team that currently is experiencing the strain right now. So that's where we go. We basically go with the triage model. We'll see and be able to help the current team that's experiencing that part. But then looking into like, well, what led? Well, now that we have a common language, what are some of the things that are impacting this team? And that's where you start discovering really what may be underneath the hood. And in that underneath the hood is really it goes back to the psychological safety as well, which means that we got to have the involvement of the leaders that are involved in supporting this team. And then you'll find that there's very quick, very easy tweaks. I mean, obviously, if it's been a business that's been there for a long time, they had the right ingredients, they had the right stuff. It just times have changed, and some things were undetected, and simply we just didn't know what we didn't know and give them a correct pathway to be able to do it. So I use Lean a lot, the Lean Six Sigma, because I think one of the problems that we have, honestly, is that we just take on too much. And
Yeah.
really, there's just as much work, sometimes not even greater work, when you're looking at what can I get rid of? What can we strip away so that there can be clarity? And that's how I work with them.
I love the coaching aspect through everything that you said there. Just taking things at face value initially and then peeling back the layers as you learn more and say, right, okay, you thought this was for example, a communication problem, but really it was a software issue or a challenge or a logistics situation or a supply chain issue, like whatever it ends up being. But not coming in with a sledgehammer and saying, I will cut to the chase here and let's just start bashing some brains around to try and find out. Yeah, exactly. It's that situation of saying, tell me
Yeah.
more, and the more information you get, the more freeing, through the psychologically safe environment that you create, that ability for solutions to come from within, to say, well, actually, you know what, now that I say this out loud, it really actually stems from a step that happens 4 steps away from me, not here. Then you're finding out more and more and more information. Such a
Yeah.
great idea, and I love, that the triage. People are familiar with that
Mhm.
type of
Mhm.
style of language and the theory behind. Tell me a bit of exactly what's going
Mhm.
on, then I'll tell you exactly what we have to do next. Whether you're going to sit and wait for 5 hours in the waiting room, or you're going to be taken in straight away because there's something that has to be fixed immediately.
Yeah.
Things along those lines as well. Such a familiar feel to it, Hannah. I really love that angle.
No, you're welcome. And honestly, I mean, there's some things that can take as simple as a blood test because, oh, you can see that right away. And some things are going to take an MRI.
Yeah,
Some things, even just exploratory surgeries, we're not going to fix anything. We're just going to see what's going on, and then we're going to come back to it. So
yeah,
you see, there's that. So a lot of times with these is understanding that, and it takes that right a leader, right? I mean, it takes a leader that's tired of the band-aid.
yeah,
That we have band-aid after band-aid after band-aid. We don't even know what band-aid's covering which band-aid, and we still have a broken finger that just needs to be click. That's
yeah.
all. So that everything else we can get rid of all this extra stuff. So and
Exactly.
it's really taking a look at that, and it does take time. I mean, it takes time. It takes empathy. It takes a leader that is willing to look at this, but it's also a leader that's looking at sustainability, not
Yeah,
just one more thing, but really looking for the right people. Because at the end of the day, we want to do and operate in our not only in our area of genius, but be purposeful in the work. I mean, you'll notice that with engaged workforces, the ones that are engaged are the ones that find meaning into their work, the ones that feel like they belong. And meaning is like, hey, the work that I'm doing here is important work. And when we're able to identify that, it's just, you don't have to like try to have interventions to have engagement. People find meaning in their work, will find a way, will find solutions, will find innovation. And that's really what I work with. It's like, hey, how can we get rid of all this extra baggage of things so that we can find in not only the meaning, but operating the purpose, both organization at the organization level, but at the individual level, so that we can perform. High performing teams are highly engaged teams, but also be fulfilled in the work that we do. Because there is that part as a human, we want to be fulfilled, not only just be doers, we're just doing my purpose, but also learn to be fulfilled in the work that we have.
so true. So true. I love it. Hannah, as you know, this is called the Best You podcast. I like to take an opportunity to ask each guest, what's one regular practice that Hannah employs to give you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself each and every day?
Breathe. And honestly, I mean, it takes time. It takes intentionality. If you notice, like something catches you off guard, you even you forget the breathing. Something I have to even remind my kids. Although such a like, of course we all breathe. No, but honestly, take that breathing. That means give myself the space. I do make sure that during the day, especially as I go from interviews, I go into conflict organization. Organizations that are experiencing some toxicity, conflict, but I'm taking the time to breathe. And in that time of breathing, what am I doing? I'm aligning. I'm aligning. I very quickly, I use my BEAT method, which is believe, engage, act, transform. And that's what I'm breathing in. I'm breathing in the right belief. What do I need to believe at this moment for to align at this hour? What is the engagement? What do have? I need to look at that moment, especially when things get hard. What do I have that I can engage in? Not what I need to get, not what I'm missing. What do I have? And then what action can I take with that so that I can experience the transformation I want? Beat.
Incredible. Incredible. This has been such an enlightening conversation. I love the story. It's absolutely inspirational. As I said earlier, to take that, doesn't matter if decades passed, post surgery, that you still use that for the good of yourself, of your family, of your community, and of the businesses that you serve. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Before we get an opportunity to To wrap things up, where can people find out more about you and the work that you do, Hannah?
Oh, well, very quickly on LinkedIn, you can find me Hanna Bauer. Also, go to my website, heartnomics.com. I have a complimentary assessment there for individual heart leadership. So you can take that and also in your handles. And I'm getting ready to launch a community. So be on the lookout for that. I'll be sending you that. So it's a free community that your people can come in. And again, I have some resources, tools, and stories. So you can go remove the hustle and start doing acting with heart.
Fantastic. Hannah, thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.